Good day. In a previous video titled The Law That Made Our Ancestor Blacksmith, we broke down the 1765 Illegitimate Act and how colonial courts used labor apprenticeships to manage poor children. But while I was researching that history, a specific memory flashed back to me. A few years ago, I posted a historical photograph online, one showing enslaved African American children working out in the fields. Almost immediately, the comment section lit up. A few white friends chimed in saying, well, my ancestors were indentured servants. They worked the fields too. It was basically the same thing. Before I could even respond, another white friend stepped into the chat and shut it down. They wrote, there is absolutely no comparison between the fate of an indentured servant and the fate of an enslaved person. Today we're going to look at why that friend was entirely right. Bluntly put, comparing white indentured servitude to chattel slavery is not just historically inaccurate, it actively erases the unique legal horrors inflicted on Black families. In this video, we look at the difference between a life bound by a clock and a life trapped in the cradle. Let's start with what indentured servitude actually was. At its core, indentured servitude was a temporary civil labor contract. Poor Europeans wanted passage to the New World, but couldn't afford it. Wealthy planters needed labor. So they made a deal. The servants signed away their labor for a fixed number of years, usually 4 to 7, in exchange for ship's passage, food, clothing, and shelter. Crucially, indentured servants were legally recognized as human beings. They had legal rights. They could own property. They could sue in court if their masters abused them beyond the terms of the contract. And they could testify. Most importantly, indentured servitude was a status bound by a clock. Every single day that ticked by brought that servant closer to a guaranteed end date. When the clock struck midnight and the contract expired, they were free. Not only were they free, but they were also legally entitled to what were called freedom dues. This often included a new set of clothes, grain, tools, and sometimes even land to help them start their lives as independent citizens. They were laborers under a harsh contract, yes, but they were never pieces of property. To truly understand how deep the legal divide was, we have to look at how the colonial system treated children. Let's look back at the 1765 Illegitimate Act and the colonial poor laws. What happened when a white indentured woman gave birth to a child out of wedlock? Under English common law, a child born out of wedlock was a child of no one. This created a financial problem for the local parish government, because someone had to pay to feed and house that child. The colonial courts did not look at that white baby and see a piece of financial capital to keep forever. Instead, the law focused entirely on financial indemnity for the state. They wanted to protect the parish purse. The courts would haul the mother into a courtroom and demand she name the father. Once found, the father was forced to sign an illegitimate bond or find a financial surety, a bondsman, to pay for the child's upkeep. If no father could be found, the child might eventually be bounded out as an apprentice to learn a trade, like a blacksmith, until they turned 21. But notice the legal mechanics here. First, the child remained a legal person. Second, The child did not inherit the mother's indentured contract. The system treated the situation as a civil financial liability, not an opportunity to manufacture an unfree human being for life. Now let's look at the enslaved children in that photo. The legal architecture governing their lives was entirely radically different. To build a system of perpetual racialized wealth, the American colonies did something unprecedented. They completely abandoned the English common law. In 1662, Virginia passed a foundational law that would define chattel slavery for the next 2 centuries. It centered around the phrase, "That which is born follows the womb." The law explicitly stated that a child's legal status followed the condition of the mother. Think about the horrifying genius of this legal shift. By tying freedom to the womb, the white power structure turned the natural act of childbirth into a commercial assembly line. If the mother was enslaved, her baby was born as a permanent inheritable property for life. There was no contract. There was no expiration date. There was no clock ticking down to freedom. There were no freedom dues. While the laws governing white illegitimate children focused on finding a father to save the state money, slave codes completely erased the legal existence of the black father. Under the concept that which is born follows the womb, a white slaveholder could assault an enslaved woman, and instead of being punished or forced to pay an illegitimate bond, he was legally rewarded with a new piece of property that he could sell, trade, or work to death. White illegitimate laws focus on financial indemnity for the state. Black slave codes focus on perpetual production of human capital. There. Even when a black mother managed to be born free, the colonial legal system found ways to weaponize these laws against her family. If a free black mother had a child out of wedlock, white courts did not treat her with the same financial leniency as poor white women. Instead of simply finding a financial surety, the courts routinely used illegitimate and poor laws as a weapon. They would declare the free black mother incapable of supporting her children and force those children into decades-long grueling indentures that often stretched until they were 21, 24, 31 years old. It was a system designed to keep black bodies bound to white land by any legal fiction necessary. So to anyone who looks at history and tries to claim that white indentured servants suffered the exact same fate as enslaved Africans because they both stood in the field, look closer at the law. One group was running out the clock on a temporary contract protected by their humanity and their legal personhood. The other group was trapped in a cradle designed by the state to be a cage for generations. Indentured servitude was a harsh chapter in labor history. Chattel slavery was a total legal erasure of human identity, based entirely on the color of your skin and the womb you came from. Knowing the difference isn't just about getting history right. It's about honoring the specific truths of what our ancestors survived. Thank you for spending some time with me today. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden history of our ancestors. Good day.